Hi, this is Brian. Welcome back to another Philosopher's Notes TV. Today, we've got another great book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, subtitled The Stoic Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. So Donald Robertson is one of my favorite Stoic thinkers and practitioners who happens to be a really cool blend of therapist, Stoic practitioner, and Stoic scholar. He's outstanding. We covered one of his prior books called The Philosophy of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, in which he connects CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, to Stoicism. It has roots in ancient Stoicism. In this book, he gives us an amazing kind of part biography of Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor, and philosophy with a ton of practical tools. As you may recall from our conversation on the philosophy of cognitive behavioral therapy, and we're going to talk about this in a moment in our first idea, Donald says that the ancient philosophers were a bit different than our modern-day academic philosophers, whereas the modern-day academic philosophers tend to be what he calls librarians of wisdom. All right, they're kind of cataloging different ideas in theory and splitting hairs here and there. Important to catalog, but there's a difference between being a librarian and being an warrior of wisdom, where you're truly going all in and loving wisdom, which leads us to the first idea perfectly. What's the ultimate goal of life? When we step back and look at the Stoics and ask the question, hey guys, what's the ultimate goal of life? Their goal is very, very straightforward, the Stoic philosophers. And again, Marcus Aurelius is one of the best embodiments of the applied practical wisdom as the emperor of the Roman Empire, arguably the most powerful and the wealthiest guy on the planet at the time. How did he exercise that power? He grounded himself in Stoic wisdom, and he reminded himself that his ultimate goal was to, as the Stoics said, live in accordance with nature, right? In general, and particularly with our nature as human beings. Now, the number one thing that makes humans different than other animals is reason. We have the ability to reason. Now, the Stoics took that a step further and said that means that to live in accordance with our nature and to have reason, we need to pursue wisdom. Which brings us to the etymology of the word philosopher. Philo Sophia, lover of wisdom. But again, not in an academic, theoretical sense, in an incredibly practical, embodied sense, realized moment to moment to moment. So, the idea and the ultimate goal is to live with that wisdom, and then wisdom is kind of the ultimate virtue, right? And the other virtues that come out of that, the four cardinal virtues we'll talk about in a moment, are really just different facets and expressions of that core idea of let's love wisdom so much. And again, wisdom, to define it loosely, is we say to know the game we're playing and how to play it well, right? But it's basically knowledge of how to live well, wisdom, right? When you do that, you bring the other virtues to play, which leads us back to that virtue compass I've been drawing, right? So we've got a little compass that we now draw, which has the cardinal virtues that I'll walk through at the cardinal points. Wisdom, self-mastery, courage, and love, right? But the four cardinal virtues of Stoicism, as Donald walks us through, are these. 1, we have wisdom. 2, we have what they call temperance, or Donald actually calls it moderation. And then we have, what do we have? Courage. And then we have what they call justice. Now, those are obviously powerful, but I don't think that they quite capture the essence of what they're really getting at. Because if you read Marcus Aurelius, you read this book, and you read about all these teachers, Musonius Rufus, Epictetus, Seneca, etc., justice is actually a weak word for what they really mean, which is love. Wisdom is wisdom. We all can kind of agree on that. And then temperance, temperance feels like, oh, I don't want to drink too much or eat too much, which is an important part of the general idea they're getting at. But what they're really talking about, from my vantage point, and I think the more powerful way to articulate it is self-mastery. We want to have self-mastery. We want to know the game we're playing, wisdom, and we want to have the self-mastery to play the game well right now, the only moment it matters. And then courage, of course, translates perfectly as courage. So we take the four cardinal Stoic virtues, right? So Stoicism, and then with optimize, we break it down and say wisdom, self-mastery, courage, and love. That's the ultimate game in life. That's the ultimate goal, is to live with that wisdom, to be true philosophers. And then again, we're always talking about closing that gap, right? And Donald walks us through this brilliantly. The ultimate game is to live with eudaimonia, being the best version of ourselves, which we'll talk about in a moment. And you do that by living with arete, which is the one-word summary of our entire philosophy. Arete, I'll spell that for curious souls. Arete, accent on the E, which translates as excellence or virtue, but it really means something closer to expressing that best version of yourself moment to moment to moment. Not occasionally, but habitually. That's the goal of life, to high-five that inner daimon, as we say. Now, how do we achieve that? That's what this book is about. Looking at Marcus Aurelius, the various battles he waged and the challenges he faced, etc., and what were his practices that we can learn about in his meditations. Well, one of them was to imagine the ideal sage. Imagine the ideal sage. So you can do that as a practice. Think about whoever you most admire, a hero of yours, either living or dead, and what virtues do they embody? This is what Donald encourages us to do. Think about it. This is what Marcus Aurelius, how to think like a Roman emperor. This is what a Roman emperor, one of the greatest and most wise leaders in history, did. He would reflect on, in his journal, the virtues of his heroes. And then he'd think about the ideal sage, which Donald makes the point. There are no gurus in Stoicism. None of them were perfect, and they knew they weren't perfect, yet they aspired to that level of perfection. And you read Marcus Aurelius's meditations, it's almost poetic how he aspires to be an undisturbed, equanimous leader responding to life's challenges as an ideal sage would be and would do. I say, and he says as well, imagine the best version of you. In fact, this is how we start translating all of the theory into practice in our work with the Optimized Mastery series and the coaches, etc. Who are you at your best? In general, what's the best version of you look like? And then in particular, energy-wise, who are you when you're showing up as the most radiantly alive, exemplar version of you? What is that? The ideal you. And then what about work-wise? What's your identity? How do you show up as that optimist, best version of you work-wise? And what about love-wise in your relationships? That's our big three: energy, work, and love. We come back to again and again and again. Think about that ideal version of you, and then think about what virtues that version of you embodies. Energy, work, and love-wise, and then actually engage in behaviors that are in integrity with those virtues and that identity. When? Today. That's what we call our big three times two: energy, work, love, identity, virtues, behaviors. I journal this every single morning, and we actually require our coaches who want to get certified to journal this every single morning, even just 9 words, capturing the essence of the ideal version of you, energy, work, and love-wise. I do it by saying I'm an athlete. That's the persona I live into. The ideal version of me is radiantly alive, energized. I'm an athlete. And I actually spell that in the Greek way with or our version of Greek with an E with a line over it. Athlete. The 2 E's have a line over it. Boom, I'm an athlete, which literally means one going after a prize. But I feel that best version of me coming through in that one word. Then the virtue I'm going to embody today: discipline. I'm disciplined. I show up whether I feel like it or not. Boom, run the algorithms. And then what am I going to do today? Identity, virtues, behaviors. Well, I've got my series of things that I do, right? My 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. I train for 30 minutes. The 1 sun salutation, 10 pull-ups, 100 burpees, 1,000 meters of road, and 10,000 steps every single day. Boom. And then I eat by a certain time. I do certain recovery practices. Boom. Identity, virtues, behaviors. What is it for you, energy-wise? We want to imagine the ideal version of ourselves and look at those qualities within our heroes and ideal sages. We want to embody them, go rock it. And then work-wise, just to finish it real quick, work-wise, philosopher. I actually draw this. That symbol, that's a phi, which symbolizes philosopher for me. I'm committed to being a world-class philosopher, showing up deeply as a student, a practitioner, and a teacher of this wisdom. That means something to me. That's my identity. That's the ideal version of me. The quality, the virtue I'm going to embody today, I'm prolific. It's my number 1 virtue. I show up, I demonstrate consistency again and again and again and again. Then what am I going to do today? Well, I'm going to do deep work hour after deep work after deep work hour. My target is 7 hours a day of pure, uninterrupted, no inputs, deep work a day. Frankly, I rarely hit that. Getting 6, 6.5, 6.85, awesome, boom. Identity, virtues, behaviors, and love, same thing. For me, my identity love-wise is soulmate in the highest sense. Eudaimon. Daimon is soul, right? I want to be my soulmate for my wife, for my kids, for you in this context. Our daimons, the best versions of ourselves, are hanging out right now. Boom, that's my identity. Ideal me. Virtue, I'm connected. I want to be connected with my wife and with my kids and with you in this virtual context. What am I going to do today? Behaviors? Well, I'm going to spend time. I write down dad. I'm AM and PM, 1-on-2 times with my kids, giving Alexander some time. Boom, I show up. I repeatedly do that. And again, bringing it back to Donald, he talks about exactly this exercise. Then at the end of the day, go back and review it. How'd you do? All the great philosophers weren't librarians thinking about ideas. They were practitioners, warriors, trying to get a little bit better day in and day out. That's a very long number 2. Number 3, what happens when we do that? What happens when we fiercely pursue wisdom and operationalizing virtue? Well, the goal is wisdom, but the byproduct is joy, a deep Stoic joy. And eudaimonia is what that would be called. Good soul, to flourish, to feel a sense of being on purpose, and the calm confidence and energized tranquility and the joy that comes when we know we're living in integrity with our highest ideals. And there is no gap between who we're capable of being and who we're actually being. When you consistently live with arete and you close that gap, you feel great. And one of the myths that we'll talk about, I went on a Stoic binge. I'm a Stoic at heart. We'll be covering a lot of Stoic books in the days and weeks ahead. We have dozens of them now that you can check out notes on great books on Stoicism at optimize.me/Stoicism, along with the 101 class you can check out, etc. So the idea here is Stoic joy, and it's the byproduct of our commitment to living with joy. And the point I was going to make there a moment ago is the fact that we think of Stoics and we think that they're unemotional. And that's actually not the case. These Stoics were known to be joyful. They were known to be truly lit up and happy in the deepest joyful sense. What they didn't buy into was the idea that we should have negative emotions. They had no problem with positive emotions. Their thing was, as rational human beings practicing wisdom, there's no space, there's no need for anger and hostility and depression and regret. When you embrace reality and exercise your reason, you can let go of the negative emotions and plug into joy, higher emotions. But again, that's a byproduct of our commitment to something bigger than ourselves, living with wisdom in service to the world. And you can get in trouble if you go straight after the happiness and forget the wisdom. This is the juxtaposition of hedonic happiness, kind of sensory pleasure, vis-a-vis eudaimonic happiness. You go after the hedonic, you get on a treadmill. You're running and running and running, accumulating more stuff and extrinsic markers of your awesomeness, but you're not getting anywhere. You don't feel any happier. It's called a hedonic treadmill. There is no such thing as a eudaimonic treadmill. The more you pursue virtue, the more you spiral up, and the more joy you get in being the best version of yourselves. And you build some scaffolding so you don't have the big ups and downs emotionally anymore, and you experience Stoic joy. Here's another cool practice. And again, the book is packed with super practical practices. Again, Donald is a therapist in addition to being a practitioner and a Stoic scholar. Time projection. He says a lot of times we catastrophize things. Something negative happens in our life, and we catastrophize it. Well, one practice is, and imagine our life just completely blowing up, right? We do that all the time. And he says, look, one way to deal with that tendency to decatastrophize, if you want to decatastrophize, is to do what he calls time projection. Fast forward 10 to 20 years, right? Imagine that right now. Take your problem, whatever is stressing you out right now, and we all have them. There's no life that doesn't have challenges, and that's a good thing, which we'll talk about in our next and final idea. A good life has challenges, period. So what is it that you're facing right now? Now fast forward 10 or 20 years and look at this current problem from that vantage point. Does it look like a big deal from your 10 to 20 year vantage point? or does it look trivial? It's almost certainly going to be trivial, and even if it doesn't, it is what it is. We need to fast forward, see it in the bigger context, and then get what needs to get done, kind of our neutral thinking idea from it takes what it takes. But that time projection can be a great way to alchemize rather than catastrophize. I love that idea. And all of that brings us to the Choice of Hercules. Donald tells this story brilliantly. I'm actually going to read. I think it's in here that we have this one. This is good. Yeah, this is good. All right, so this is Donald quoting Epictetus. I actually read this passage straight from Epictetus' discourses that Donald references. On the Saturday morning of our optimized coach graduation, we had almost 600 of our first 1,000 optimized coaches fly in from around the world to our graduation weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? On Saturday morning, we did a Spartan race. So I gave them, that was one of the requirements of graduation. You need to be at your best ideal you, energy-wise, as an athlete. Spartan race or some other equivalent alternative to demonstrate you're in the best physical shape of your life. Because we want to go from theory to practice to mastery. We don't want to be hung up on being a librarian. We want to be warriors. Anyway, I gave a pep talk lecture right before we went and hit the buses and became the second largest team in Spartan history, which I've mentioned recently. I read a version of this quote. What do you think Hercules would have amounted to, Epictetus asks his students, if there had not been monsters such as the Nemean lion, the Hydra, and the stag of Artemis, the Erymanthian boar, and all those unjust and bestial men for him to contend with? Why, if he had sat at home, wrapped up asleep in bed sheets, Epictetus says 2,000 years ago, living in luxury and ease, he would have been no Hercules at all. Epictetus tells his students that just as Hercules cleansed the earth of monsters without complaining, they should set about conquering themselves by purging the base desires and emotions from their hearts. Then Donald continues, and he shares the story of Hercules that Socrates and other classic philosophers like to share. So imagine Hercules, mythical hero, of course, but imagine him before he was Hercules. He's a young man, right, and he's out on a path, and he's walking around kind of contemplating his life. And then two goddesses race up. One kind of bursts in front of the other ones and kind of knocks the other one out of the way and kind of comes up, and she's sort of preening. Socrates says 2,500 years ago. Preening, overly made up. Right? You can almost imagine someone with way too much makeup and all that stuff going on, kind of preening for a selfie on Instagram is kind of what I imagine when I read Socrates' words, right? And she says, hey, Hercules, my friends call me eudaimonia, right? She lies. Her real name is Vice, right? But hey, I'm happiness. And if you follow me, your life's going to be easy. It's going to be awesome. Just follow me and it's going to be great, right? Vice dressed up as virtue. Now, the second goddess is radiantly beautiful, but in a more austere, simple, understated way. And she walks forward, and she has a solemn look on her face. And she says, Hercules, I'm not going to promise you that life will be easy, because your life, if you follow me, will not be easy. Her name, by the way, is Arete. She says, no, your life is not going to be easy, but if you want to be worthy of the gods, you need to be willing to face challenges. You need to be willing to struggle and overcome obstacles so we can see all that you're made of. Then, as a hero, you will be admired by gods and men alike. But it's not going to be easy. Of course, we know the choice that Hercules made, and of course, Socrates, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Donald Robertson, me, we're all telling you the same thing. Life is presenting us with a choice. Are we going to live with vice, dressed up as happiness, which is the hedonic pleasure of get this fast, eat this food, pursue this goal, extrinsic, toxic, vicious. Vice pursued becomes vicious behavior. Or are you going to make the harder choice, particularly in our society? But again, this isn't a new challenge. 2,500 years ago, Socrates was talking about the choice of Hercules. Why would he do that? Because this is an eternal challenge between virtue, our daimon guiding us, and vice, our demon guiding us. We all need to make a choice. The question is, what choice are you going to make today? Stepping forward, closing the gap, remembering the goal of life, Remembering that it's ultimately to live with reason, to live with wisdom. Wisdom can be translated into these different virtues. Wisdom, self-mastery, courage, and love. That's the goal. When you do that, the byproduct is Stoic joy. Also, contemplate the ideal you, the ideal sage. Know the identity, the virtues, and the behaviors across your energy, your work, and your love. You do that consistently, day in and day out. You start more and more consistently, never perfectly, but more and more consistently closing the gap and experiencing that joy. Project yourself forward if you find yourself catastrophizing, and alchemize it and use it as an opportunity to practice your philosophy, which we're going to talk about in a couple PNTVs. William B. Irvine, another great Stoic thinker, wrote a book called The Stoic Challenge. We're going to have fun with that one. And then finally, remember the choice of Hercules. Again, moment to moment to moment, we have a choice. Are we going to step forward into virtue or back into vice? Let's choose wisely today and make today another awesome day. Think about one idea that you can move from theory to practice to mastery on. Donald, thanks for another great book. Everybody, let's do this. See you tomorrow. Hey guys, this is Bri. I hope you enjoyed that video. We have a lot of people ask us what Optimize is all about, so I just wanted to give you a super quick tour of our site, tell you what we do. We do two primary things. We have an Optimize core membership, and we have an Optimize coach certification program for people that want to go from theory to practice to mastery. So the core membership is basically $10 a month, depending on whether you do monthly or annual, and you get instant access to over 500 philosophers' notes, the 6-page PDF, 25-minute or so MP3 recordings of these great books. And then you get over 1,000 Optimize Plus ones, 50 Optimal Living 101 masterclasses, etc. And we have a free trial the team set up. Get it, free for 14 days, and then go from there if you like it. So we're blessed to have a lot of people who subscribe to this, including some of my friends who happen to be some world-class peak performance gurus like Tal Ben-Shahar, who taught the two of the largest classes in Harvard's history, starts every day with Optimize. Ben Greenfield, friend and coach. Optimize is, bar none, my go-to source for taking a deep, efficient dive into some of the world's best books via the Philosopher's Notes. It's an indispensable resource. Thank you, Ben. Marcy Shimoff loves Philosopher's Notes. Mark Devine, retired U.S. Navy SEAL commander, dear friend, who starts his days with Optimize Plus One. Win in the mind routine to charge him up for the day's battle. If you're serious about leading heroically, I recommend you use them too. Hoo-yah, thank you. And 10,000 plus other awesome humans around the world. That's the core membership. Then we have, and I should say we have apps. Excuse me, you can get apps, iOS and Android. We feel pretty proud and blessed to have basically a 4.9 ranking and people saying some great things. You can check that at optimize.me/apps. And then our coach program is all about helping you master yourself so you can serve heroically, so you can empower others to do the same. We have trained over 1,000 Optimize coaches from over 50 countries. And really excited about this. This is one of the core levers for us to fulfill our mission to change the world one person at a time together, starting with you and us today. We've been told that, here's one little thought, and we have hundreds of testimonials you can check out about how it's transformed people's lives. And if you want to be a coach, you're coaching practice. Now, half the people who do this want to be coaches. The other half just want to master their lives. But Barb, a coach of ours, says, I already had 2 coaching certifications, but Optimize Coach was indisputably the most valuable I have taken. Thank you, Barb. Honored to be part of your life. You can learn more about what we're doing with Optimize Coach at optimize.me/coach. There you go. Hope you're doing great. Look forward to sharing more with you soon. Have an awesome day. See ya.